Welcome. John Pearson here with the Zoom review for your weekly staff meeting issue number 579. And this was recorded on October 4, 2023. And the book we're reviewing today with some guest reviewers is Losing Our Religion by Russell Moore. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But our guest reviewers, Jerry Butler. Jerry, thank you so much for being part of this. I hope I can thank you in the 20 minutes or so we'll be doing this. Jerry, you and I connected back in the 70s. You were pastoring in Oregon, and I was leading a Christian camp and conference center in Washington. And then fast forward in the 90s, we both ended up at Willow Creek Community Church and Willow Creek Association. And David, that's when you kind of joined the party.
Right.
And you bailed us out multiple times as an outside consultant. And then I think it was in a snowstorm in Chicago, a headhunter from Southern California called, and I moved to Southern California. And I brought you with me to bail me out there at Christian Management Association. So listeners, we go way back, and I'd hate to say the number of ministry years or ministry miles you see represented on the screen, but it's substantial.
Yeah.
So Jerry, David, thank you for being part of this. I'm going to jump in with this quote from Losing Our Religion by Russell Moore, an altar call for Evangelical America. If you're from a faith tradition that you don't know what an altar call is, I'm sure Jerry or David can tell you more about it. But here's what Russell Moore, who now is the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today, the magazine, he previously served as president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And he writes about the very painful experience he had in leaving that organization and why. And he says on page 170, when a member of Congress told me about the books on narcissistic personality disorder he was reading in order to better deal with President Trump, I realized that I had read all those same books in order to deal with some Southern Baptist leaders. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So some of you may want to just exit now, delete this, because Russell Moore is not a fan of former President Trump. But that's okay. I had mixed emotions in reading this book. He's thoughtful. He's a fabulous writer, extremely well researched. The metaphors are abundant. I don't think all of them blessed me, but I'm just wondering what the two of you think. So let me read you one more quote that maybe for me is the gist of the book, and then I brought you guys along to tell me what I should really think. He says, based on his Southern Baptist Convention experience, he's no longer in the Southern Baptist Convention, if you can imagine. He says, we see now young evangelicals walking away from evangelicalism, not because they do not believe what the church teaches, but because they believe the church itself does not believe what the church teaches. And more than that, many have concluded that the church itself is a moral problem. I mean, very strong words, and he doesn't mince words. So, Jerry, you come first in the alphabet. Your gut on the book? Did you?
Well,
were you stimulated by it?
I was stimulated by it. I was surprised at how it affected me with mixed emotion. I didn't expect that. I know Russell Moore. I know a lot about growing up Southern Baptist.
Yeah.
And in the book, I felt you really hear the heart, the genuineness, the authenticity, the compassion of Russell Moore. It's there. I think he has critiqued well the state of American evangelicalism with a tinge of, I think, Southern Baptist color. I know some of the code language, some of the code in the book that I think is to placate, in some sense, Southern Baptists. I just found the book, I'm going to be honest, tedious and at times. Now, I've read another book by Russell Moore, and it was the same deal. He is very bright. You get that. And I think sometimes he is so committed to making his point, defending it, or bringing clarity that he loses it. There was over sermonizing, times retelling of Bible stories. That's not bad. They just weren't necessary, and you kind of lost his argument. But I think he has the diagnosis correct on the surface, but could have gone deeper, in my opinion, to the question of why. There's more to what has brought us to here. Is it a worthy read? Yeah, I think so. It could have been shorter.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, I don't know, David, what you're going to say yet, because we haven't talked in advance about this, other than I had angst, and that's where I've landed. So already we're 2 out of 3 of saying, really, everybody should read the book. But and you, depending on where you line up, if you're a Southern Baptist or not. But David, what's your first pass?
Wow, we're going to have a homogeneous unit here.
Oh dear.
3 for 3.
And by the way, Joanne, my wife, to our listeners said, well, I hope there's a lot of conflict, because that will make it more interesting. I always remember Patrick Lencioni says the reason your meetings are so boring is because there's not enough conflict. So, so Jerry, feel free. But David, what's your gut?
Well, I don't think I'm not going to create much conflict here. A couple things. First off, my assessment of the book is exactly where both of yours is. I had mixed feelings, and some of my sense of my experience with the book is very similar to yours, Jerry. A couple things really quickly. One, I really give Russell more credit for, he really stands up for the truth here, and it's his take on the truth and his desire to speak the truth, and where, where he really resonated with me is he grew up in a deeply conservative evangelical denomination, and he had the courage to step away from that and to challenge it. And I really give him very high marks on the courage side. Now, did he handle that all correctly? None of us ever handle any conflict, or especially exit from the denomination of your family of birth, and he has generations of background in that. So I would just say, I really commend him for his courage to step up and step out of a setting that he feels he could no longer work well in. I think he's attempting to breathe new life into the word evangelical, to a people group, to an ideology. I think that's all extremely commendable. I think for me, like you, I found myself, I thought, like, it's a 250-page book. I think it could be 125 pages. I think he just keeps after the argument till he feels he's covered it from 360 degrees. I can be guilty of that, and it's useful to stop.
Not me.
Much sooner. The other thing I would say is about audience. This language, which I completely relate to and would have my own stories about altar call, this notion of an altar call for Evangelical America, he very quickly narrows his audience here to the faith traditions that understand that if we were in a Catholic church or a high church, Orthodox liturgical church, you're not going to see many people relating to that language. And so he's after a people group here. And I think in that sense, he both probably helps himself being focused, and in another sense doesn't really represent, I think, the kind of thinking that we might find in the broader Christian faith.
Right. Yeah, I think just in my title, an altar call, kind of begins to limit the audience in some ways. Am I going to pick this up? Because I worked in the Southern Baptist tradition, then I worked in interdenominational circles, and the call is just not something we do, not language we use. So it was just kind of an interesting title, but he could have gone deeper in his analysis and diagnosis. I think he describes the surface realities of what's going on in American evangelicalism, but there's a weakness in getting to what are the root causes and really hitting those head on.
I want to add to that, Jerry. I think there's something important to realize here. What Russell did is he went heavily to the political arena and the political tensions in the church, looking for proof or evidence of his very sound observations. So I think there's hardly an observation he had that I didn't agree with, which showed up in the book as italics, and then you can work off of them. But I would say too that my sense of that is there are other arenas to go to find evidence for the things that he points out as weaknesses in the church and the evangelical movement that don't. Politics is just one arena of many and many places in the river, the cultural river we swim in, to bring what I would call strong evidence for the need for change. And in that sense, then he reveals his bias, his political bias, and that gets to be problematic for me after a while in the book, because I would just say there's many places we could look for evidence of where the church is struggling to be all that Christ it calls us to be. And in that sense, I felt like the book may have missed was a little bit off of its point, of its desired point.
Yeah. Well, those who read the book will find that part of Russell Moore's pain was, here he had this really key position, head of the, I want to say it correctly, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission for the Southern Baptist Convention. And yet he early on made it clear that he felt Trump was unfit for office, morally unfit. And he hammers that multiple times, and he would say, yeah, but we're not electing a president, or a pastor, we're electing a president. And when he wouldn't kowtow to the other Southern Baptist leaders to support Trump, he got, I would use the word shunned in essence.
Right.
And his wife seems to have been the courageous one early on, saying, I'm out the door here with the Southern Baptists, if you want to keep at, and so I think there's these poignant moments in the book. I certainly can't identify with his pain. I've been part of a small Baptist denomination early on. Joanne was too. My father-in-law was a leader in what is now called Converge Worldwide, the Baptist General Conference. I understand denominationalism and even the cultish part of it. And so I'm just not sure it's applicable. And the political thing is such a strong theme in it. I did appreciate, he quotes Hannah Arendt, famously warned that those who choose the lesser evil of two evils quickly forget that they still choose evil. Now, he doesn't quite get to almost like what we're experiencing in the news with this is October 4th. Yesterday, the Congress vacated the speakership for the House of Representatives, and yet nobody's saying, well, what's plan B here? So what I was kind of looking for, but I think what he said near the end of the book, he says, how do we get the church and evangelicals back to focusing on Easter Day not just election day.
Mm-hmm.
And so he seems hopeful. So my question to you guys is that hope misguided? Do you have any sense that evangelicalism is going to have its day, or is it the bad word? Is it the bad movement? Is there something else? Somebody said lapsed Protestants would be the biggest denomination in the South if they were a denomination. So, all the stats, the Barna stuff of people leaving the church, pastor burnout, you can get very discouraged. But I sense towards the end of the book that Russell Moore had hope. Jerry, do you have hope?
For the evangelicals?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I think, honestly, this is one of the most poignant illustrations of you don't pour new wine into the old wineskin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And David, going back to your point about there's so many other ways to look at that, but he spends so much time on the political. Pastoral experience since 2015 is you couldn't separate the two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Comment and in response to sermons, and as so many sociologists have pointed out, in our culture, our identity has become merged, political and religious.
Mm-hmm.
And he probably has to spend a lot of the time, because that's sort of the vortex or the lightning rod that has defined or brought the movement in the public to what it is. And another book, I just want to mention the subtitle, because it really gets to the point to where I think Russell was kind, that's good, and
Mm-hmm.
but from another book, the subtitle is How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's hard to argue with that critique.
Yeah.
Russell got beat up leaving the Southern Baptist.
Yeah. Right.
Very tough position in the vortex of power in Washington, D.C., representing the largest denomination. I don't know how that could have been a win-win. I was able to just sneak out of the Southern Baptist movement, but he was very, very public. But I think in the book, you don't pick up any bitterness. I think
I agree.
Great spirit about moving on. Yeah, I got beat up, and a lot of shocked and surprised him about the roots of his spirituality and his faith in the Southern Baptist movement. So I've always
and I love that little segment near the back of the book where he talks about speaking at a non-Southern Baptist church. I think it was Anglican, and afterwards he felt like a couple hundred people came up to him and admitted that they are former Southern Baptists. And one lady says, but I keep the Book of Common Prayer on my desk, and right next to it is the Baptist hymnal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the rich traditions of denominationalism that all make up evangelicalism, people are nostalgic for that. But David, do you have hope?
If I look back over a couple thousand years of church history, we've been in some pretty dark moments. So I kind of step back and try to get up to a little higher altitude and say, look at the Christian faith and what we know as the gospel, which is centered in the person and work of Jesus Christ. I have absolute 100% hope in that. But the containers in which that gospel have been put over the decades and centuries, there were some really dark moments in church history. Just look up Inquisition, and from which those are the roots of all denominations in the United States and around the world. prior to us, there were our roots are in the Inquisition, the people who handled the Crusades. We can all find examples down through church history where the church hit these huge low spots. I don't have any conviction that the notion of evangelical will survive in America. I think over time we will get to a remnant, and then from that remnant, I believe, to your point, Jerry, there's a new wineskin has to be developed in which that remnant will come forward and thrive. So I don't think there's anything gained or lost, or particularly lost, I'd say, if the evangelical word and movement died out. But what was left behind were the core essentials of the true gospel, which we can find in many places and many traditions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well,
I think a thing, John, that just showed me the spirit and the journey of Russell Moore was just a very brief illustration where he read a quote about Bible teacher Beth Moore and her Bible ministry.
yes.
Conservative theologian said that he was criticizing her publicly and vocally, that Beth Moore was a gateway drug to feminism.
Yes.
That was me.
And Russell Moore said, that was me. I underlined that same thing.
Yeah.
And Jerry, along that line, I was just going to say, in addition to that, he talks about a Saturday morning breakfast at his church, men's breakfast, that was primary for prayer. And he asked his 14 and 16-year-old sons to go with him. And they were sitting around the table next to various people. And as they were praying around their table, he admits that, well, now my sons are next up, so I'm going to start praying because they're not going to want to pray. He says, but they just boldly began to pray for the needs of the men that they were sitting next to. It just reminded him again that, this gospel is for all ages. And it showed me Russell Moore's heart, which I didn't get in the first half of the book. He's got so many footnotes, good stuff. So this isn't a critique of Russell Moore, but to talk about is there value in reading Losing Our Religion? And I would say, amen.
Absolutely. I would agree with that, John. And I think is what I said earlier. I just want to re-emphasize. I just kudos for somebody like him, standing up and being courageous and stepping out of it when he was asked to put the institution ahead of what was right and good. No matter who was doing that, no matter who was asking him to do that, they were out of line, and he was courageous. And his own stories of trying to figure this out. We're hearing the heartfelt story of somebody who's working through a journey, and many of us are doing. One other thing I want to add: a couple places he's quite practical. One was he made a statement about. He said on page 89, he said, "Avoid foolish controversies." Yeah. I often find myself. I think you guys can relate to this. Sometimes we don't know what conversation we're in. We'll start a conversation with family or friends, and the conversation suddenly becomes something that it's not the conversation we started, or we're not sure, what are we talking about here? Yeah. What is because right now, because of the close relationship between politics and faith, we get tangled up in things that get said, generalizations that get made, or specifics that get made. And I remember in my graduate work at Wheaton College, we had a professor, his name was Dr. Vic Oliver, and he spoke about constants, variables, and absolutes, and the power of knowing what are we absolutely sure of. Let's just put that aside. What are the constants of our faith, and what are the variables of it? And if you think of it like a saucer in that regard, there's something to be said for us trying to figure out, and I think this is where Russell was trying to really help us sort that out without using that very metaphor, about saying, let's get back to what we can agree on around absolutes. There are constants of our faith that we want to hold on to, and there are going to be variables we want to let go of and not argue about. And you think of the people who will be moving into family situations over the coming holidays. That creates tension. We'll see lots of articles and news bits on this. And we'll find if we can find our way to say, let's talk about the things that bind us together.
Yeah.
And that's the peacemaker, perhaps, voice in me that wants that more than I want the controversy.
We probably need to wrap this up, but I love this from page 156. As one congregant said to his pastor, "We have tried the turn the other cheek stuff. It doesn't work. It's time now to fight." And Russell Moore says, we have arrived at the point at which, for many people who name the name of Jesus Christ, Christ's likeness is compromised. How did this happen? I wanted to read that because when I asked Joanne, I mentioned to Joanne today we were doing this thing and I was getting your opinion on losing our religion. She says, well, at the end, be sure to get Jesus, what Jesus thinks about all of this. So I wanted to work this in. I also wanted to mention, if you read my review, which will be listed before this review, How Trust Works by Peter Kim. Dr. Kim is the professor of management and organization at USC, University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business. How Trust Works, the science of how relationships are built, broken, and repaired. It's not a faith-based book, and but I've read a lot of books on trust, and I saw this as kind of these are two interesting books to be reading at the same time, because Russell Moore is saying, like, okay, can we rebuild trust now that this has happened? So last word, Jerry, and man, thank you. Any final thoughts here? Read the book, right?
I do encourage Christians to read the book, to challenge their own thinking. Take some of it. His structure is very good. He raises a question, then he gives some directions of things that you can do, and pay attention to that. I don't have the hope that I think he has for the evangelical kingdom hope. Maybe I'm being over spiritualized here. I don't lose. But I think that it's going to be a delicate dance to move away from this merged identities, these personal identities, that has to be our Christian and our political identity. I did a sermon, and then the people came up and said, well, are you woke? Wake,
David? Yeah. Oh my. And David, any last thoughts, especially as you're still out there consulting and helping many organizations and churches? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, Russell in the book Moore talks about the tension between individual faith and community faith, and I think I'm with Jerry. I don't know that I have a whole lot of hope for the container we have known, but a great deal of kingdom hope, and as the church would move, and individuals, we would move from being church-centric, which is a lot about institutions and structures and partnerships and alignments, to being kingdom-centric, which is much more about expressing the heart of Jesus and being present, which I think is, to me, the future hope for this faith that we call our own, is going to be as we become increasingly present in our communities and with people, and less concerned about the structures, the containers, the institutions. And I think we're seeing evidence of that now with younger generations who just have really choking on the institutional side of things. So,
yeah. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate you're taking the time, and I'm guessing I really owe you now for this. Jerry, if we can get you out to Southern California where David and I are, we'll have to go to the San Clemente Pier for the $2 dinner. Actually, It's now $7. It was $2 when we first moved here. But thanks for being part of this, and blessings to you. And so we're going to end the recording.
Great to be with you.
You bet. Thank you, John.